Welcome to the This Lyric, That Truth podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to my author guest today. Geoff Peters wrote a book called Love Child. Now, Geoff, I want you to introduce yourself, but you really got me with the introduction, the first sentence of your book. I am the bastard son of a nun and a priest. What a way to start a book.
It's definitely a memorable opening line. I've heard that from a couple folks, but it's the kind of thing that when you recognize that that is the ingredients, that makes up the ingredients of your start of your story where you start. Honestly, many years ago, I had friends that said, "Oh, you need to get that on a bumper sticker, or you need to get that on." I mean, and it was just sort of this owning it kind of an idea, and so it felt like the appropriate opening line.
Can you explain a little bit about, that background? Because it is how you start your book, and then you do sort of springboard into you were a really terrible kid.
I
You
had,
were
yeah, we had like
terrible.
there were a lot of issues going on, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, so my mother um, was going through a horrible divorce from a very violent and abusive man, and she sought out counseling in the church as a part of that process. And the priest that she was going through her counseling with, she and he crossed lines. And I am the result of them crossing those lines. As I later found out, much later in life, I mean, he was in a very uh, tough marriage as well. Not to make excuses for anything that they did, but it did create the little chemistry experiment that was putting two hurting people into a locked room so they can talk about their emotions and feelings. And lines were crossed. And so here I am. And that, of course, created the springboard for everything that happened in life from that point on.
Now, can you explain a little bit? Some of us might be only familiar with a priest being from, like, a Catholic tradition, and so this
Yes.
was he was a priest, but they were allowed to marry.
Correct. So he was an Episcopal priest,
Episcopal
more
priest,
from
okay,
the Anglican tradition, and so yeah,
okay,
they're allowed to marry and have families. And
okay,
unfortunately, he was married and did
okay,
have a family,
okay,
just not married to my mother, obviously.
okay. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you kind of talk about how your mother made this decision that she was going to take you and raise you by herself. She experienced a lot of shame within the church, and you had a really your mom probably did the best she could, but real kind of unstable childhood.
Yeah, I think, my mother was, this is all obviously on reflection back in, backwards. I think God sometimes shows us the best life lessons in the rearview mirror, right? You look
Mhm.
back and you go, oh, that's what you were doing. Okay, now I understand. But for her, she was just hurting. She was struggling, and the struggle continued into my birth. When I was born, she was her family, my grandmother, and other members of my family told her, you either need to put him up for adoption or you need to have an abortion, because we cannot take the shame of what you've done with a married priest. And then on his side, I learned later, similar. The church itself, the formal religious structures of the church, they have a way of dealing with these things, and part of it is to move the the priest, the person who was the guilty party, move them to another location, and so he was moved, and in that process, both her family and his larger family felt that the idea of continuing to be connected at all, having him connected to me, having the two of them connected to each other, was just going to perpetuate this shameful story. And it all just needed to be swept under the rug. It all just needed to go away. And so that's how life began for me. But it forced my mother on a very difficult path because she was struggling emotionally. She was struggling financially. We lived most of my life on food stamps and you know flirting with homelessness. Um, and in fact, on a couple occasions, we actually probably were homeless, but somebody took me in, and somebody else took my mother in, and it just kind of worked out that way for a period of time. So that caused a very rocky upbringing for me.
Mm.
And when I look back on it, uh, over my schooling years, I was in 13 schools before my sophomore year of high school. And so it was a very unstable
Yeah.
way to start the world, to start life. Yeah.
I'm hearing your story and I'm feeling kind of terrible that I said you were a terrible kid because you had terrible. It's not that you're a terrible kid. You had terrible circumstances, and emotionally, you're acting out because of that instability and uncertainty and constant change.
Yeah. And of course, not knowing it then, one of my, you don't really understand the waters you swim in sometimes. I think some of the questions that I've had in my life, people say, "What was it like growing up without a father?" And I say, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I do now because I'm a father.
Mhm.
I get it, and there's a different type of healing and a different type of pain that pops up now, understanding the way that I love and care for my own children versus what I did not receive and how I did not understand the idea of fatherhood growing up, even the idea of a heavenly father, which is a completely other topic. But the reality of um, starting life with these kind of circumstances, it when someone says, what was it like growing up without a father? I have no idea. I just It's not like I was 9 and he left. He was out of the picture by the time I was 6 weeks old. So it was yeah, it was a very rocky, change heavy way to begin life. I For a period of time I was a ward of the state. At one point, I was actually removed from the state because they actually took me out of my mother's care and said, "You can't live with your mother in the state of Arizona anymore. You can either stay in the state and go with a foster family, or you can go with family members outside the state." I'm sure if I had had family members living inside the state, that would have been an option, but I didn't have any other family that's inside the state, and so. Um, just My mother and I did not we struggled
Mhm.
relationally together and just to kind of make it through our life together.
Well, and then you're dealing with this stacked rejection. It's a,
Yeah.
rejection of your from your father, regardless of the circumstances, and then it's a rejection of the very state you're living in.
Yeah.
And
And also the other layer on that as well was the rejection from the church. I mean, I was the
Mhm.
kid that was whispered about.
Yeah.
um people knew what people knew the story, and
Mhm.
uh even I'll say this, even into my 30s,
Really.
I went back to the church for an event that my mother was doing, and I came into the fellowship hall after we had been in the sanctuary for the event, and someone just said, "Oh, welcome. Is it your first time?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I haven't. I'm I'm so and so's son." And she paused. This older lady, she paused and she looked at me. She goes, "Oh, I know all about you."
Mhm.
Like, I'm in my 30s. And it's not like I had a choice in the matter anyway.
No,
But
but
I
that
was
kind
this
of that
whispered,
shame.
like,
Yeah.
the
Woo.
rumor mill, the
Yeah.
everything, the like, and I can remember even going
Mhm.
through youth group and other things, like there was always this
Mhm.
awkward side. It just
Mhm.
The feeling of rejection from the church, from the state,
Mhm.
from my father, and
Yeah.
from my mother from time to time as she was attempting to try to
Mhm.
balance herself. And
Mhm.
sometimes doing that when your child is acting out like crazy means you need a break from the child. But for me, that was an extra like push away. So
Yeah.
it was just this
Yeah.
crazy uh,
Yeah.
cooking scenario, all these ingredients cooking together to just kind of create what happened for me.
I want to talk to you about two things. I want to talk to you about the person that came into your life that kind of changed your trajectory.
Mhm.
Trajectory. You crawled your way to college miraculously, right?
Yeah.
And then you had a roommate and who gave you a different perspective of Jesus. But then you're so passionate about missions. And I'm wondering if it's because of all of this stuff and really having then a heart for the rejected and maligned, and
Yeah.
maybe that's what's part of your calling right now. And so talk to me about crawling yourself to college and then your roommate.
Yeah, the one thing, and it's strange now because I'm not really involved in any way in this part of like the things that got me to college are no longer really a part of my daily life. But I was actively involved in music. Um, and so ended up in university on a music scholarship. Um, and so that gave me the opportunity. In fact, my GPA and my SAT scores are absurd. Like there is no way that I should have gotten into any university, except for God and this
Mhm.
gifting or whatever else around music. And so I was allowed into this university, and that honestly allowed me the freedom to be on my own,
Yeah.
to have a support structure. I mean, it sounds strange to call the university a support structure, but I'm living in a residence hall. There's a place I can go for food, and I'm no longer surrounded by anybody who's known me before. And it's sort of like a fresh start and an opportunity to really begin to step into life on my own. And so, yes, you're correct. I mean, even though I had grown up in the church, I knew the stories. I knew the biblical concepts of who God was and Jesus. I mean, I knew the stories backwards and forwards, but I had never developed a personal relationship with Christ. And so it was my roommate reading his Bible one morning. He was doing it every morning, and one day he just got super frustrated. He closed his Bible and he said something that I won't repeat. And I looked at him and I just said, "Oh man, don't worry. I know that part. Don't worry about it. He rises again in 3 days. Everything's going to be okay." Like not to do spoilers, but that's how the story keeps going.
Mhm.
And he just kind of looked at me and he laughed and he said, "No, no, no. I just can't understand what God is telling me here."
Mhm.
And it was that I think it was the use of the present tense, where I was like, "Telling you." And I think it was the first time I had really something about just that statement connected. I mean, I know that they say the reality is, we can do what we want to bring someone to Christ and help people understand, but it is the work of the Holy Spirit that actually makes disciples. It is the work of the Holy Spirit that draws people to himself. And I mean, that's the only explanation for that moment because it was no big grand reveal. It
Mhm.
was just the use
Yeah.
of the present tense that
Mhm.
struck me as that's what I needed to hear. And all these dots began to connect. And I suddenly realized I'm missing a whole other half of the story.
Mhm. Is that then what spurred and I know you talk about changing you were in like a music major and that's how you got to college on scholarship.
Mhm.
And then you switched over to public relations
Yeah.
and you just got really passionate about that. And
Yeah.
I love that too, because that isn't how God got you to that college, but that's how God then spoke into you for what you were supposed to do for your future.
Right. I think about it in terms of, we read in the scriptures that, you know, he is a light unto our feet. And
Mhm.
that really is for the next step. And I mean, I've said this to someone actually recently. I feel like, at least for me, if God was a spotlight down the road, I would probably several times have been too petrified to even move. If I had really seen everything that was going to happen,
Mhm.
I mean, so a light unto my feet is one step at a time, and that's plenty. But that's it. Like he got me the step to college, and then the steps afterwards have been one step at a time. Give us this day our daily bread. Like just move us onward. That's been
Mhm.
it.
You were in kind of a what I would call like a secular company
Hmm.
in your job, and you just sort of got to this point where you just felt convicted that perhaps right there was
Yeah.
someone was doing something that was kind of immoral, right? They were presenting
Yeah.
something one way and you're like, I'm not really comfortable with that. And so you researched Christian companies or something. You ended up at Compassion International, which is a
Uh-huh.
organization a lot of our listeners will be familiar with. You were there for what, not 7, 9 years?
I was there for 7 years. I mean, not directly out of that. There was a couple steps in between, but that is
Yeah.
exactly, it was those moments of conviction where
Mm,
the downside of, well, the downside, upside, whatever, the reality of that story was I, for the first time, felt like I had this faith-based conviction for my life. Like now I know, now the dots have connected because my roommate made this statement, and now we're fast forwarding a couple years later, and I'm now living this out because this is the foundation. I now understand this is the foundation for what I'm supposed to be about. Uh and so I was called into the managing partner's office at this PR firm and offered a promotion because they were excited about what I was doing. And I was like, well, now maybe is the best time to ask my question about this thing that seems a little bit off because I'm the junior person. Clearly, I probably don't know the whole story. And so I asked my question. He told me the whole story, and it was exactly what I had feared. And I said, if you don't mind, let me take a day to pray about this opportunity because I want to make a good decision for you and for me. And he said, he paused and he said, well, how about if we make Friday your last day? It was like this moment of kind of an unintentional heroic stance
Mm.
of like standing up for my faith, but I didn't realize that that's what I was doing.
Right.
Um, and that's where the trajectory shifted. It was like,
Huh.
okay, this really is the foundation for me. This really is what I'm
Mm.
going to be wrapping my life around.
Was that the moment when everything connected for you?
Yeah, a
Where
a
you're like,
hundred
"No,
percent.
no, wait a minute. I am authentically following Jesus.
Yes,
And because I have
yes.
these convictions of how he has taught me how to live, I cannot go forward and do this thing, or at least take a minute and pray about it."
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That was when the dots, everything started, like the tapestry begins to like tighten,
Mhm,
and the
mhm,
picture begins to come into focus, and you go, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I see where
mhm,
this is going. I see the way you've made me, um,
mhm,
and there's no going back.
hmm. So you went from there, and then you did get into, I don't know, Christian ministry type of work, and you were like a pastor in the mix, and so that's kind of
Yeah,
the next phase of your life.
yeah, absolutely. And then eventually, to your point, yeah, I was able to. I after serving as a pastor for a few years,
Mm,
I started at Compassion International, which is still to this day. I mean, I'm not serving there anymore, but it's still just one of the most beautiful. I feel like I grew a lot. I understood a lot more about uh, the plight of children and families all around the world, and the need for those of us that understand who Jesus is
mm,
to have that just come out of our pores as we come alongside people in our own backyards as well as halfway around the world. And so that's always been, um, I mean, I feel like that's part of the layering of as God teaches you one thing and then you move to the next and the
mm.
next, and you look backwards and there's all these building blocks of how he's formed you. And that was a significant building block for me and something that's directed my path even since leaving Compassion.
You talk a lot about different stories of faith and why, as Christians, being a missionary is a big part of it
Yeah.
and living on mission and mission
Mhm.
for Jesus. And it's in great part to what you've experienced in
Yeah.
other countries and cultures.
Yeah. It is. And I think for me, the biggest learning I think of my journey is because I had to reflect back. Why is it that I grew up in the church?
Hmm.
And it was and I understood the stories and I understood the narrative. But why did I not understand that this was a lifestyle that I was stepping into? Christianity is, I mean, these days we talk a lot about lifestyle branding, lifestyle brand. I think Christianity is probably the original lifestyle brand. I mean, it's when you say yes to something and everything changes.
Hmm.
The way you act, the way you respond, the way you lean in, the way you love others, your posture, everything shifts. So how did I not understand all of that growing up in the church? And my it took my college roommate just dropping that little seed, and suddenly everything starts to connect. And then that moment in the PR firm where it really solidifies. And as I started really living into my faith and connecting with people of other cultures around the world through Compassion and other ministries where I've served, I've had the joy of working alongside leaders from I mean, I've been in 55 countries at this point, and just the journey continues. But there seem to be some common threads that are missing in our Christian narrative or misunderstood in our Christian narrative. And a lot of it centers around the way we just talk about the mission of God and our relationship with Him as a part of His mission in the world. There's just some things that haven't connected, I think, and not
Mm.
just for me, but that's what I've been learning more and more. And it's a bit of why I wrote the book, because I realized, gosh, I'm sort of not alone in my misunderstanding of some of these realities.
That's your passion in this world then, to teach others that. So you write this book
100%.
with your story to teach us these things. And you do that in a beautiful way. You also mentioned the song from Hillsong, So Will I. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I. I can see your heart 8 billion different ways, every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I.
I can see your heart in billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I.
I still remember where I was when I first heard that song. And ironically, it wasn't in church. I
Mhm.
was in the Houston airport, and I was walking from flight to flight, and I had like an hour and a half between flights. And I would throw my headphones in, and I would just click on to music, and whatever I was listening to, that song came up next. And when that lyric came out, I got chills. I started to tear, because I think part of it is I was I was getting ready to go overseas, to do some of this exact type
Mm.
of work. And I mean, that's why I was in the airport. Um, but a couple things stood out to me. Number one, the number 8 billion. I instantly knew that's the population
Mm.
of the world. It's not about this. I mean, if you look into deeply into mission statistics, you'll learn that there are roughly 2.2 billion people in the world who might be considered least reached, or unreached, excuse me. And if you say least reached, that's roughly 3 billion. Least reached being people who don't live near a church. There's not a church within walking distance. There's not, maybe even someone has shared the gospel, but nothing has taken root in that community. And so there's 3 billion people living in the world with that right now. And actually, statistically, the number of people in those regions of the world, um, because of the population growth, um, the number of least reached people in the world still today is growing by 60,000 people daily. Daily. So, with all of the work in Christendom, all the pastors, all the believers, all the missionaries, all the everything for the last several hundred years, we are still going backwards. The trend line is still increasing. There are more people today than yesterday who are
Mm.
living in a context where the gospel is not known and celebrated.
Mm.
And why is that the case? What's the disconnect? And so I heard this number 8 billion, and I was like, you're right.
Mm.
Like, the-
Mm.
it's not just about loving the unreached or the least reached. It's also about loving our fellow believers and making sure that we all understand the journey we're supposed to be on. That when we said yes to following Jesus, that was the moment we opted in to his mission. Followers follow a leader, and our leader has a mission, right?
Mhm.
Um, but oftentimes we said yes to following Jesus
Mm.
and celebrated that like it was the finish line.
Mm.
And it's not it. It's the starting line.
Mhm.
And now there's a job to do.
Mhm.
And there are So many people out there that just need to know how much he loves them. And it's not just the unreached. I'm a person who grew up in the church. Um, and because of my own circumstances, I didn't know how
Mhm.
much God loved me.
Mhm.
His right hand man, this priest, left when I was 6 weeks old. When I, when I, my my earthly father left, he was also God's right hand man. And so how can God, clearly God must not love me. And then even the words when I was at a group home in my ninth grade year, the words of a counselor there when he told me, he said, "Oh, I looked in your file. I see who your father is, and I see the circumstances." And he said, he goes, "I just need you to know." He goes, you're probably number one on the devil's list. He's got plans for you." And I was at a Christian group home,
Mm.
so we got to do a better job of loving people,
Mm.
those who we think already know, and those who have never heard. Um, we talk
Mhm.
about calling as if it's an if statement. If I'm called. No, no. When you said yes, you opted into the call.
Mhm.
Calling isn't an if, it's a how. How am I a part of your work in the world? Not if. Um, and I think there's a lot of other dots that need to be connected as well. And God has called the largest, to use this terminology, has called the largest army in imagination to his work.
Mhm.
And we somehow treat it like he only wanted to send, you know,
Mhm.
a couple of us into actual daily work for his purposes.
If people are listening to this conversation and they're maybe even experiencing a little bit of conviction, right? Like, oh yeah, I said yes to following Jesus and now I need to like do something with that. I mean, your book is a great place to start, but do you have anything else you recommend? Like, is it loving better? Is it telling more people about him? And I love your story about your roommate because he didn't sit you down and beat you over the head with his Bible. He simply read it and he interacted with it and attempted to live it.
Yeah.
And you're looking at him and that's what you're observing. It isn't just someone that's coming at you with words, but it's someone coming at you with their life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think for me, one of the most impactful things that has really helped me understand my own service.
Hmm.
There's a book by a guy named Eric Rees, and it's an older book now. It's a couple, maybe 20 years ago. But the book is called Shape, and it's an acronym, SHAPE. And his conviction in the book is that to understand the way you're supposed to do kingdom service, you need to understand the way God has shaped you. S stands for your spiritual gifts. H is your heart, your passions. What has he put inside of you?
Mhm.
A is your abilities. What do you have unique abilities for? P is your personality, right? If you're the most introverted person in the world, if you're the most
Mhm.
extroverted person, like there are things
Mhm.
that direct us, but and E is your experiences, your education, your
Mhm.
the stuff that happens along the way. And if you look at the totality of all of those things, God doesn't want you to step out of the way he made you in order to serve as a part of his work in the world. He doesn't
Mhm.
need you to drop everything. I mean, and
Mhm.
the missions movement, we have done this, and I say we because I'm a part of it. We have done this incorrectly for years. We have taken people who are tremendous engineers and teachers and doctors and lawyers and mechanics, and we've said, amazing. Do you want to serve in missions? Now you're going to be a church planter.
Mhm.
I'm like, I have no skills for that. Yes, but that's what you're going to do. It's
Mhm.
like, well, hold on a second.
Mhm.
Um, I've heard stories now from doctors who have intentionally taken jobs as doctors in places like the UAE or Saudi or other parts of the world where Jesus is not so well known.
Mhm.
And they've done it because they said, well, they're hiring for doctors. I'm a doctor. I'm a Christian. Now they're going to bring me to their country on a work visa. They're going to help me learn language skills. They're going to immediately immerse me in community. And I can go there in a sustainable fashion because they're paying me a salary.
Bam, you're a missionary.
Exactly. Like
Right?
that's it, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
so use what God has given you
hmm
and look
I like
for how to
that.
plug that in.
You don't have to step out of all of that, your personality and your bent and your all of that, but you do have to step and do something.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you have to take a step, but it's not like you have to step out of who you are.
100%, a hundred
Mhm,
percent. I mean, and
mhm,
that's honestly, that was
mhm,
part of that formation happened during my time at Compassion because you're coming alongside sponsors who are coming alongside and lifting up these children in an amazing way. And these sponsors are often saying, well, I don't know how, like, how do I write to my child? What do I talk about? You're saying, just tell them that you love them and that Jesus loves them.
mhm,
It's that, yeah, it's that simple that
mhm,
you have that and you
mhm,
can use what you have to pour into somebody. It
mhm,
doesn't mean it, it doesn't mean you have to suddenly become somebody you're not. Actually, God
mhm,
created you that way for a purpose. One of my favorite examples, I have a close friend who has struggled with addiction for many, many years. And he honestly felt like he was not equipped to be in service to God. He felt like he was disqualified because of all of his issues in his past. And then one day he realized, in a conversation with somebody else who was struggling with addiction, that actually, if I wasn't the person that I am, if I didn't have the experiences, God couldn't use it. I actually might be the most uniquely qualified person to talk to this person about Jesus
I love that.
because I get it.
I love that.
Um, and that's it. It's just
Mm,
serving as he has shaped you and recognizing that when you said yes to following Jesus, you joined the movement. That was your opt-in moment.
you're in.
You're
Welcome.
in. Welcome. Maybe there's no job description for you yet, but just keep going. You don't know how to do it, but keep going.
Your book is called Love Child. You can get it, I assume, wherever you get your is it available on Amazon too? We can put the link in the show notes
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
Christian bookstores and things like that. Jeff, you talk about your son in the book, and you mentioned just before we started recording, he's graduating from
He's
college this week.
graduating from university tomorrow. Well, I'm not sure when
Mhm.
this is going to air, but at least
Yeah,
today,
yeah.
as of today, he's graduating tomorrow. I'm so thrilled for him. He'll be getting a degree in English literature, of all
That's
things.
amazing. If
Yeah.
you read the book, I'll give you a little tease. If you read the book, there's a very cute story about a folded up dollar bill Yoda or something. I don't know. I love
Yes.
that. I love that.
Yes.
And your son's overcome some things too himself, and so congratulations. And then do you have one or two children, little younger ones
Yeah,
now?
I've got one. He is graduating from university on Friday, and our daughter is graduating from preschool on Monday. So this is the way God has shaped things, and so and yes, and we have another younger child who is 3. So 3, 5, and 23.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing your story and of what you've overcome. Thank you for talking about those turning point moments in your life
Mm.
and in your faith. Thank you for using the things you've gone through to point others to Jesus. And I don't even know what is it that you do currently.
Right now, I work alongside various ministries, helping them to figure out who is our audience and how do we talk to them? How do we
Mm.
inspire and equip them to do what God wants them to do in the world? That's that's what I'm doing.
Those ministries are lucky to have you, Jeff.
Oh, it's been fun.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thanks for having me, Cece. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of This Lyric, That Truth. If you were inspired by today's conversation, feel free to share it with a friend and leave a 5-star review. If you're looking for more hope and encouragement in your music, download the Joy Media mobile app for free wherever you download your apps. I'm Ceci, and I so look forward to sharing more in-depth conversations with you as we talk about the lyrics that encourage us and shape our lives. Meet me back here next week for another episode of This Lyric, That Truth.